reading, we're at Mount Horeb, also known more popularly as Mount Sinai. And God invites the prophet Elijah to exit the cave and stand on the mountain before the Lord. The Lord will be passing by. But Elijah senses that the Lord is not in this wind which is crushing rocks. Imagine that. And the Lord was not in the earthquake. And the Lord was not in the fire. The Lord was not in any of these destructive things, but in a tiny, whispering sound. Life can include some pretty awful storms. Some literally that might even affect the lifestyle of individuals, including like farmers that can't get their planting in time, or early frost, or rains that stunt the growth, or a drought. There also are storms like other forms of financial crises. Maybe struggling to pay the mortgage, and then there's a huge vehicle repair bill just a month before our family reaches Christmas. Maybe it's a family problem. A child, a grandchild that seems headed in the direction of some addiction, or someone dear to us that we believe is in some abusive relationship. Or maybe the storm has to do with health. We or a loved one were just diagnosed with cancer, Alzheimer's, or Parkinson's. What do we do when storms come our way? Well, usually the very first reaction is a certain sense of confusion because we just don't know which direction this is going to go in. We doubt, and we have some fear, many times fearing the worst. But even if we're not the most prayerful kind of people, we also, as part of our reaction, cry out to God about the storms and the ghosts that are happening in our lives. Just as the apostles did when they were in the boat which was being tossed about by the waves, for the wind was against it. And when we experience our storms, and the storm here lasted a while, so often it seems like God is silent. But Christ comes, and he comes so often like a tiny whispering sound and says, "Take courage, it is I, do not be afraid." Well, when Jesus offers us this invitation, "Take courage, it is I, I'm here, do not be afraid," what is our reaction? So often our reaction is tied to how we've been trusting in God in the days, the weeks, the months, and the years up to that point, where our level of faith is at. Perhaps possible reactions in that boat, in the midst of the storm, and Jesus coming as a tiny whispering sound. One response might be, "Is that Jesus? No, it can't be." Almost like this faith that, would God really come and help me? And it just, his nearness seems so unlikely. That's a sign of a very weak faith. Another reaction, possible reaction, if you're in the boat, I mean, what I would probably say in my weak faith, if I see Jesus, be like, "Jesus, get in the boat before a wave knocks you over." And we treat God as if he's like a pair of Tylenol. You know, Tylenol, it's real and it's effective, but not against a migraine. And so often our storms are more like migraines, and we believe in God, but is he really going to fix this? And this too is a sign of a very weak faith. And then there's Peter's response, who hears Jesus, "Do not be afraid, it is I. Take courage." Jesus, look, if that's you, test the water, and out goes the other foot. And what about the other 11? Like many of us, stay in the boat and watch and see what happens. And then, in his faith, though, rather than keeping his eyes on Jesus, he starts thinking about the storm again and comparing the storm to Jesus, and he starts sinking. But because of his faith, he says, "Lord, save me." And Jesus catches him and then says, "Peter, why did you doubt? So little is your faith." Wow. But he has faith, doesn't he? He took a few steps out on that water, and he knew who to call upon. And then, of course, perfect faith is when we respond to Jesus and we keep our eyes fixed on Jesus and we don't let the storm shake and trouble our vision, our trust, and our belief that Jesus is near. Maybe many of us in this church right now have some pretty terrible storms going on in our lives. And I don't mean to be a pessimist, but if life is going along pretty well now, sooner or later, and if not 2017, maybe 2018, storms will come. But Christ will too. And we are called to greater faith. And it's better to believe in the good times. So when the storms come, we have a stronger faith. But if the storm does overwhelm us and we start to think and start to sink, it's not because God isn't near. And we can always cry out, "Lord, save me," and expect that Jesus will be there to catch us as he did Peter. Take courage. It is I. Do not be afraid.